Welcome to the latest Seahawks Draft Blog live stream. Rob Staten, Robbie Williams, and Adam Nathan with you here today. Not gonna lie, I'm not in a great mood. That has to go down as one of the least enjoyable weekends of sport I think I've ever had. And you can probably tell from my voice that it's been that kind of a weekend. The Seahawks have contributed towards it with an embarrassing loss to the Carolina Panthers, where it's not even just the fact that they lost at home to a pretty bad team, and I think it's fair to say that's what the Panthers are, despite what they showed today. It's the manner of the loss. You know, they got their asses kicked up front again. They can't stop the run again. They just look like a really unprepared team. They look incredibly soft, and they have done since Germany. You know, they're not the tone setters. You know, the Panthers were in Seattle's faces throughout that game. You know, they looked like the team that was getting after it. And the worrying thing is that even though the Seahawks have still got a winning record at 7-6, you kind of look at the Panthers, who've got less talent than Seattle. Maybe that's wrong, because they've got some defensive pieces and they've obviously got DJ Moore and an offensive line. Maybe that's the wrong way to put it. I'll walk that comment back. But you sort of see the Panthers, and they're sort of reaching the level of competitive football now that the Seahawks are not. And you watch the Lions and you see what they're doing, and the Seahawks just are regressing week after week. And I include the Rams loss in that, the Rams winning that, because even though it was a win, look who they were playing. So I don't know what's gone wrong here, but I think there's all kinds of questions about where this team is. I think there's all kinds of questions about whether this defensive scheme is ever going to work and whether they should just write it off, because I think the worst thing you could do is, and they've done this in the past, is double down on a bad idea. And we've seen that with Jamal Adams and his contract. If this isn't the scheme for the Seahawks, don't double down on it by spending a whole draft class trying to make this system work. Get the right system first is what I would say. But my word, how can you not defend the run? I mean, you've not got that much to defend in the passing game. Make Sam Darnold beat you today. They ran, the Panthers, sorry, this is a long opening gambit from myself. They ran for 223 yards today. And they had the long scoring drive, which took 5.5 minutes off the clock in the fourth quarter, 68 yards of 74 yards rushing to score to go ahead 10 points. And then they just ran the ball at the end to run out the clock. I mean, that's embarrassing. That is embarrassing. That is pants pulled down stuff, that. Robbie, what do you think?
Well, I mean, you said a lot right there that just kind of hits the nail on the head, really. I mean, this is a finesse team. They looked very, very undisciplined. And it's been this way all year. They just don't tackle well at all. And I don't know where that's coming from. They don't wrap up. They're always going for a big hit. And you're right. I don't know how they just don't stack the box with 8 to 10 guys every time and try to make Sam Darnold beat you. But the reality is that this team is just not. It's not very good. It's just not. We've had a great season. I've been invested in this season more than I expected. So I'm literally happy with like how it's gone. Like the Geno ride and experience has been, way more than I could have expected. But to see the defense play as bad as it is, it's really heartbreaking to watch them come out and just give up that much yards and not be able to stop the run. It's super frustrating. I mean, at what point do you say, okay, enough is enough, Cody Barton, you're off the field, period. You suck. I don't care who you put in, but put somebody else in. You've got to have players that are willing to give it their all and get after these running backs, and the defensive line is nowhere to be found. It's embarrassing. I mean, honestly, this whole thing is, and it comes back to, like, I don't know if it's a Clint Hurt thing or if it's there's too many cooks in the kitchen on the defensive side of the ball. Pete, Clint, Sean, whoever it is. I mean, they need to figure this out.
Adam, what do you think?
Yeah, look, I suppose each of us has our own way of looking at the season, and I'd like to think that I've been fairly consistent that throughout the year I've been with the context that I think the team are trying to win now, or do their best to win games now, but also lay the building blocks for the future. I think there's two things that I'm taking from this on a macro level, and the first one is the manner in which they're losing these games. And Rob, you touched upon this earlier, like, if you play against the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes puts up 40 points in the first half, slinging it all over the field, you can sit back and say, look, I mean, that guy's he's amazing. Like, what can you do about that? But, for all the analytics community who do a lot of good stuff, but, how much they dismiss and discount running and momentum and things like that, you can kind of see the way the Seahawks are playing, that they're just being outmanned and bullied. And I would imagine that where there are some games you can say, oh, look, throw the tape out. Don't worry about it. We'll start again on Wednesday and go again. You can't really ignore what the team are doing right now. Like, they have to watch this and get better. And I imagine that must become quite difficult in the locker room. It's 4 weeks in a row now. They've been run pretty much all over. And I would imagine that's going to start leaving some scars there for the rest of the year and perhaps going forward. And the second thing is, water does find its level, and perhaps that's where we are seeing, with the team now. But I'm getting a bit frustrated that I feel like the bad losses are starting to outnumber the good wins on this year. And that's what's slightly concerning me going forward, that whereas we hope that you go into this offseason thinking, well, they put so much in place for next year, I don't know. I'm a bit concerned now that we've had quite a few of these streams after defeats now, where I feel we've been sadder or more disappointed than we've been euphoric after wins we weren't expecting.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I don't think there's probably only really the Chargers game where I came on afterwards and thought, I'm surprised at that win. I think all of the others made some sense at the time. And you can, you've got the Falcons, you've got the Saints, you've got this, the manner of the losses to Tampa Bay, the Raiders, who just lost to the Rams in their state. I mean, it's just really hard to have. The great thing about this season is that the Seahawks were in contention for a playoff run, and if nothing else, were kind of giving us the same kind of vibes that I guess Lions fans are getting right now, which is they think, look, we're whatever they are, 6 and 7. They may or may not make the playoffs after all, but ultimately they look like a fan base that are going to go into the offseason thinking, because of the Rams, we're going to get a high draft pick, and we can feel really good about the direction of our team. We can believe that we've got the right coaches. We can believe that we've got the right systems. We just need more talent. And the problem that we're getting with the Seahawks right now is that, yes, they're going to have the high draft pick like obviously the Lions are going to have, courtesy of the Broncos. But I'm looking at the team now and thinking, what can you actually hang your hat on with this team? It's making you question, because there's the obvious things, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Tariq Woolen, the two offensive tackles are playing fine. There are obviously, it's not to say that they haven't got anybody they can build around. I'm not suggesting that for a second. It's not all totally barren. They had a very good 2022 draft, but have they got the right defense? They're paying Quandre Diggs $18 million next year. They've invested in the right areas. How easy is it going to be to turn this around? What do you do with Geno Smith? That becomes, increasingly, if he's going to throw multiple interception games and not be able to beat the Panthers at home. And I know there's a lot on his plate with a crap defense and no running game, but, come on, if you want to be a $30 million man, like people were saying a few weeks ago, you've got to get the job done here. It's just really hard to feel that positive about the direction of this team when you can't even stop the running game, when you know that the opponent is going to be one-dimensional and try and run the ball. And by the way, they haven't got any, it's not as if you came up against Saquon today, is it? I mean, they kept saying that one of their running backs was plucked off a practice squad over and over again. And the other guy's just come back from injury, and he's one as a guy who's bounced around the league. He's done a decent job for them since Christian McCaffrey left, but he's bounced around the league. It's just so hard. And you keep seeing the same things. This is the big issue that I have with Carroll and the coaches that he brings in. You just see the same issue. How many years now have we seen it without a consistent pass rush? You're terrible defending the run. It just carries on and on and on. And nothing ever gets addressed with it. Do you know what? There was somebody posted a tweet earlier, and today validated that the D'Amico Ryans, I think it is the defensive coordinator at San Francisco, is expected to be the hot candidate apparently for head coaching jobs in the offseason. And they pointed out that this will be the third offseason in a row where a San Francisco 49ers coordinator will get a head coaching job. after Mike McDaniel and obviously Saleh, Robert Saleh. And you think the Seahawks they're never in this position, are they? Carroll never brings in coordinators and coaches who are coveted by other teams. The Niners lost Saleh, and they bring in another guy, and then he's like producing what they did today. They've got Brock Purdy at quarterback and lost Deebo Samuel, and their defense basically shut down Tom Brady in the Bucs. We made Tom Brady in the Bucs look like they were 10 years younger than they are, in Germany. It's really hard to sort of have that much faith about this team, and the draft's exciting. Yeah, we can all get excited about that draft pick at number 2. But Robbie, you need to have a bit of hope, don't you? You need to be able to look at this Seahawks team and go, I can see where they're going. They just need more of it. And right now it all feels a little bleaker than that.
Yeah, they need to start investing their money in the defensive line and linebacker position more than they have been in the safety position. I think you kind of nailed the head on the, nailed it there with the, Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs scenario. I mean, neither of them. I mean, Adams clearly isn't even playing. Diggs doesn't look light years worse than he has been last year, and there's so much to be said about where they're investing their resources right now, and the fact that we can't even stop the run with any team with a bunch of backups, it says a lot about the coaching staff and the fact that they're really not preparing to play the run. And I mean, there's no offense to Sam Darnold, but you should be able to line up the box and try to make that guy beat you. There's nothing that says that he's been fantastic, over the last few years. And I think it's come to a point now where it's like this has to fall on Pete. And I don't want to really bash Pete, but I'm at that point now again in the season, like I was last year, where it was like Pete's got to go. Like, he's done a fantastic job through the beginning of like getting us ready with like Geno and making us believe in that. But at this point, like, the defense is considerably worse every single year since the LOB era. I don't feel like it's never really improving. And they'll have like, those stints where there's like 3 or 4 games where like we seem to kind of figure it out, and then we just fall apart again.
Do you know what? It really, it's strange actually as you were talking, because I'm personally not going to go down the fire Pete Carroll road today, because I just don't want to have that conversation. But you speaking, Robbie, did make me sort of correlate that to miseries this weekend. That ultimately, I do think the one thing that Pete Carroll has shown this year is that there is something to be said about him as a leader, and the way that he has brought this sort of team together, and they look like a team that would struggle to win 3 games at one point, and they have sort of managed to win 7 so far and may win more. I suspect that there's at least one down the road with the Rams. I think they'll probably will win that game. But then again, maybe not. Who knows? But there's something to be said about the way he leads. It's just that the tactical side of it and the schematic side of it, for me, there are major question marks there. And I think that's sort of similar to what, and Adam may well agree or disagree with this. This is sort of similar to the other thing that's been a sort of miserable thing this weekend, which is the England thing, is that I think there is a lot to be said about the England coaches, the way that he handles the team and the way that he's brought these players together and has got the team punching above its weight. And now, he's got them into a position where you think, yeah, do you know what? I don't really want to lose this. But at the same time, I'm also thinking from a tactical point of view, is he the man who's going to get them over the top? I kind of feel like it's 2 very similar situations here. And I don't know. I don't know what to say, because I suspect that you might be right, Robbie. I think maybe the best thing is just to, was saying it last year, the year before, things just have you can become out of date, you become stale. Sometimes you just need to change. They have a shelf life, coaches, and maybe Carroll he's had his, and it's just time to go in a different direction. But I don't know. Before I bring Adam in again, I want to we have had a super chat from Jeremy. Thanks for all you do, guys. These streams are officially my favorite part of Seahawks games now. Disgusting football. Cheers. Thank you, Jeremy. Really appreciate that super chat. And if you've got a question, I've seen a few of them coming in, or you want to make a comment, then please super chat away, and we will definitely come to those. And I hope my voice, I think it sounds horrible, so I apologize for that. Adam, jump in.
Look, Rob, you can't change your accents. Don't worry about it too much. Oh, sorry, you mean that it's croaky? Oh, sorry, I didn't. Sorry, my bad. Look, I don't know what the demographic of the listenership is in general, whether it's sort of more UK based or American based. But Rob, as you'll know from the UK Seattle Seahawks Facebook group, it's generally a very optimistic place. And there's a lot of like, how dare you criticize? And I think part of that comes with the idea that if we are going to stay up till midnight, we might as well try and enjoy it when we do it. And on my show, I have almost certainly cost our show a number of listeners because over the last 5 years, I've been pretty fervent in wanting Pete Carroll gone. And I'm pretty happy to hold my hands up and say that, whether that will prove itself right or wrong in the future. I'm not going to try and pretend otherwise, but I think anyone that listens to my show would probably say that I've been down that route, whatever. But I've really tried to, pull back on that and learn. And, I'm lucky enough to speak to someone in the locker room on a fairly regular basis. And I'm trying to learn about like how much the head coach does matter from a team building and mentality perspective. I don't think you can underplay how important that is. On the flip side of that, I was watching after the game, going through social media, and I think it was Pro Football Talk said that Steve Wilkes was told he had to do an incredible job to keep the Panthers job full time, and he's doing an incredible job. And it just makes me wonder, like, do you guys think, and maybe the comments can give us something, or do you think this is the best a head coach could be doing from a football standpoint with the roster he's got? Because I think that's probably a fairly, fair way to frame the discussion if we're going to talk about Pete Carroll right now. The last 5 years, that's probably been and gone now. You can have your gripes, but that's happened and we are where we are. But right now, do you think this is the best we could do? Because if not, then it becomes a valid conversation.
Okay, here's one thing I want to say about this. I'm really going to make this point, Robbie. What you just said there, Adam, just made me think. Because the San Francisco 49ers are on their third flipping quarterback, right? They're on a guy who was Mr. Irrelevant in the draft. And they just hammered the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he's making plays. And it seems like every single year the Seahawks have a couple of injuries at running back, and everything just falls off. The running game just goes. This is supposed to be bread and butter for the Seahawks team, okay? So if you've got a coach down the road who can coach teams to win like San Francisco won today on their third string quarterback, you should be able to do better than this. You should be able to run the ball because that's your philosophy. That's your identity. You should be able to stop the run because that's your philosophy. That's your identity. If this team just can't pass rush well enough because they don't have the guys up front, I can live with that. Okay? If today's problem was you just couldn't get off the edge or you couldn't get an interior push against Carolina's decent offensive line, then fine. That's fine. But if you can't run the ball and you can't stop the run, and that's what you exist for, then that is a problem. You've got to be able to find a way to do that. That's supposed to be your speciality. You've got, and look, this roster is not very good, but there's just little things that you have to be able to do because that's what you believe in. That's everything that works because you make that happen. It all comes down to the run and defending the run. And Pete Carroll's failing completely. And Kyle Shanahan's system down there in California, they're on the third flipping quarterback and they're beating the arse off teams. That pisses me off. So is he doing well enough with what he has? The answer is no, based on the last 4 games, 5 games, whatever it is.
I mean, the only thing the Seahawks do really well right now, ironically, is pass the football. They don't stop the run particularly well. They don't run the ball particularly well. And they don't stop the pass to a particularly high level. I mean, that's probably not a great indicator going forward, is it?
No, it's funny, Adam, when you said that, I was trying to think when was it was a few weeks ago. I think we were 6-3, and I was like, this has to be Pete Carroll's like best coaching job. Like he's got to be up for coach of the year. It's funny how like 4 games changes everything, and my mindset on how I'm actually processing this, because I feel like, the first 4 weeks on the defense side of the ball, we were just garbage, absolute garbage, right? I mean, it felt like the same thing. Then something switched, and it felt like we were playing really, really well on the defense side of the ball and offense, and everything's been coming together. And now we're back to like play okay on the offensive side of the ball, but as you said, we pass particularly well. We're not running well. Granted, we had no running backs today. I get it, but it's incredibly frustrating. And as Rob points out, like, you see other coaches who are able to adjust, and we make, I don't know who said it, someone here, Billy Hodges, he posted something saying we don't adjust, and we don't. There was a time back in the day when we'd play terrible in the first half, and then in the second half adjustments, and our defense would come out and just lay it to them. I don't see that anymore. It's a completely different team compared to what it used to be.
Got a couple of super chats I want to get to before we go back into this. Kyle says, and Nwosu and Taylor are nice complementary players, but there is no one on the DL, on the D line and linebacker to build around. I can handle watching getting beat with a lack of pass rush, but I can't handle getting gashed. Kyle, thanks for your super chat, and I agree. If it was just that there was an obvious flaw like the pass rush, you can kind of live with that. It's just the basics not being able to do it. You can't run, you can't defend the run. Like, to give you the statistics again, the Panthers passed for 105 yards and completed 14 passes today. They were one-dimensional, and they ran for 223 yards at 4.8 yards a carry. They're getting nearly 5 yards a carry as a one-dimensional offense in your backyard. I'm going to come on to that, by the way. And then the Seahawks, who had 241 passing yards and therefore should have been able to provide some balance for their running game, 46 rushing yards, 3.3 yards a carry, 223 to 46. It's just not good enough. It is not good enough at all for the way that you want to play and for this staff. And frankly, it's high time that the question, we would keep coming back to this, the question needs to be asked. Why are you not fixing this issue with defending the run? That has to be asked. And there has to be, and last week I was listening to the Pete Carroll show, and it was basically a Bobby Wagner half an hour. Made up for lost time there and not being able to ask how good Bobby Wagner is at the press conferences, that's for sure. This needs to be half an hour on what is going on with your run defense, Pete. We'll see if it is. Not holding out much hope. This from Noah. Over the previous 3 games, you gave up an average of 205 rushing yards with another 223 today. 0-4 against the NFC South should be a fireable offense. Noah, thank you for your super chat. And there's another one here from Mike. To all 3, which head coach would you realistically go for if Carroll goes? That's an interesting question, actually, Mike. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to put this fellas on the spot now because they might not have had a chance to think about it, but we'll return to that topic. And if I don't return to that topic, Mike, because I've forgotten, please just send another message and you don't have to do a super chat. Put it in all caps or something and we'll come back to it. I'm sure someone will give me a nudge if I forget. But it'll give the guys maybe a little bit of time to just have a think, and me to have a think as well about alternatives, seeing as we've gone down that little road. I actually pulled up what the team's record is at home over the recent years, and it's pretty dreadful. I put it in the article. I haven't got it here to hand. They're now, I think, 3-3 at home, and they were 3-5 at home last year, and they were 7-1 the year before when they had the 12-4 year. But before that, they were also sort of middling around 500 at home. Adam, what's happened to this is supposed to be a difficult place to come and play. Teams are supposed to hate coming to Seattle. It's become, instead of it being sort of like a really horrible 1-star hotel visit, it's becoming like a luxury stay for a lot of these teams. They come over, they get a pair of slippers in the room with a lovely robe. There's a chocolate on the pillow. The bathroom's lovely. You've got plenty of towels. There's a decent restaurant. Marco Pierre White's cooking you a steak in the restaurant. It's just everything seems to be working for opponents who come to Seattle. And the Seahawks they're soft. They're easy to play against at home. I think teams are up for it because it's a long way. So they kind of get pumped for that. But why are the Seahawks so crap at Lumen Field?
Look, it's a tricky question to answer from 6,000 miles away. I mean, the last game I was at, San Francisco last year, the atmosphere was amazing and maybe won the Seahawks the game. But I don't know. I mean, if I'm trying to think about it, I mean, I was hearing like Seahawk chants in the second quarter when the Seahawks were on offense, which were, I can't remember.
I noticed that as well, and I'm really stuck in my head.
I didn't imagine that, did I?
No, it's true.
That was surprising because, I hate this idea of like a knowledgeable crowd or otherwise, but it has always been very apparent that everyone knows exactly when to cheer and what for and when to stay silent. But that seemed quite stark at the time. And, I guess every team is probably on their second go around on the road of being, Carolina basically got a timeshare in Seattle, the amount of times they've played at Lumen Field or, over the past 5 or 6 years. And I suppose that the way in which the Seahawks are giving up plays is very deflating. If you've got 3rd and 6 and it's a run up the middle and it's a first down, that's really, a gut punch for the crowd. And you can imagine people sit down and, go for a swig of beer and then it's first down. Oh, got to get up for this again. I've just given my best cheers on 3rd down. I wonder if maybe the manner in which they're giving up chunk plays it is depressing to the fan base and sort of sucking the life out of the building. But look, we're not there. I don't know if anyone in the chat was at the game or has been at games this year, but or Robbie, you're at least a bit closer. You might be able to hear, 3,000 miles versus 6,000 miles or however far. You might be able to hear the last strains of a Seahawk chant. But I wonder if there's a bit more of that it's just the manner in which they're giving up plays is causing the deflation.
Robbie, have you got a thought on that? I think Adam's probably right. It's probably difficult for us to sort of get a real angle on this without being there, and people who are actually there might actually be in a better position to sort of explain this. I don't know. I think the Seahawks have just lost an edge, Robbie. I think they had it in the Denver game when they played that because they treated that like it was the FA Cup final. But I'm not sure. Well, they're not able to do that every week, are they? Obviously, we didn't see any of that intensity today.
Yeah, just to touch base on the crowd thing. I mean, it's tough because usually I go to a good chunk of the games and I haven't been to any this year. So it's really hard to get a feel on it. But I did notice it in the fourth quarter, like they did kind of a quick, panoramic view, and it looked fairly empty in the fourth quarter, which is shocking to me. I normally, if I go to a game, I'm never leaving early, and nobody usually typically does. Regardless of the school, people stick around. So to see that was, I don't know, maybe it's a little disheartening to see that. Like I don't know. I don't know why people are not sticking around and to chant on offense just seems silly. You know better than that. Like if you go to the game on a regular, if not, there should be people around you telling you to sit down and shut up. You only scream on defense, and if they're not doing their job as fans.
I think this is part of the problem, though. So, I'm not piling on Brock Hewitt here. I really like Brock Hewitt as a commentator, and I enjoy his radio shows. But he's just tweeted out, and I had to reply to it while he was speaking on him because I just had to ask the question. He says, watching an NFL team unable to stop the run is like watching a baseball team unable to hit. The effort is the immediate, easy answer to scream. I don't think any of us have screamed that, by the way. But the reality is talent and skill are often what's missing. Many of these Seahawks front seven defenders are fringe NFL players, and that has come to light. And I had to reply, surely, though, Brock, there has to be something you can do to stop giving up 4.8 yards a carry and 200 yards a game, especially when you're playing an opponent without a dynamic, creative, productive passing game. If Kyle Shanahan can make QB3 do what he did today, can't we play run defense? That's the thing. Even if I don't think I'm not pointing effort at all. And I think definitely Seattle's D-line is not good enough. But surely there has to be. Sometimes it's just a scheming thing. I mean, is Brock Purdy the next big thing in the NFL? Probably not. But, you put a game plan together and you get him out there. Look at Sean McVay. Baker Mayfield was in the building for 10 minutes, as he said in the locker room after that game the other day. And he led a 98-yard scoring drive to win the game, and played reasonably well, having just come through the front door. Sometimes it is just about coaching, about saying, look, okay, we're struggling a bit here. We're going to get this done. And look, I haven't studied the Lions that closely, but I suspect, given how crap they've looked on defense, they did an all right job against the Vikings today, that there are ways to get around it. Mike's got in touch. Nothing will change until Pete is gone. We all know that. Same with Southgate, Rob. As soon as you brought Gareth Southgate into the discussion, I will address that. I mean, you may be right on both occasions. The difference is that Gareth Southgate hasn't been in charge of England for, what is it now, 12, 13 years. And and I think they're very different, the two individuals there. I mean, one job essentially plays a major tournament every 2 years, and the other one plays a season every single year. So I think there's a big difference between the two, and I wouldn't want to equate them in that regard. And I think Gareth Southgate can win something with England. I wish it was next week. Kyle says, with a third string QB, will San Francisco even attempt more than 10 passes with their ability to run the ball on Thursday night? Well, that's a good question.
They shouldn't. They don't need to.
I mean, I dread to think what that running game is going to look like. I'm going to Lapland in this week, and I'm severely tempted not to bother watching that game live. Because just staying up till, and bear in mind they're 2 hours ahead, so it kicks off at 3 o'clock in the morning. There's to stay up till 3 or get up at 3 to watch the Niners kick our arse is not fun. Keep the super chats coming in. I've got another one here before we move on. Mike says, just so tired of the same old mental mistakes. I'm with you there, Mike, and thank you for your support with the super chats. Keep them coming in. Robbie, do you want the Seahawks to qualify for the playoffs? Or are we at a point now where, is there any point? I mean, I don't, for me, there was a point in 2010 because of Beastquake, but let's assume that something as momentous as Beastquake is not going to happen again if you get a backdoor playoff qualification. Are the Seahawks better off picking 14th in the draft or 21st?
I mean, it's an interesting question. Like, I always think that you can catch lightning in the playoffs, right? We've seen this team go on a 4-game winning streak, and it's fallen off. And if the defense can light it up for 4 games and the offense can light up for 4 games, then yes, I would like to make the playoffs just for the opportunity, for the simple chance that you never know. Maybe this could be Gino's absolute comeback story, and Pete can ride off into the sunset. But the reality in me says that that's not realistic, and I don't think that's going to happen. I never want to wish to see this team lose, especially for draft picks. I never liked the suck for luck thing. But I will say that I will continue to root against the Broncos for as much as I can so that we can get that second pick. I think this one's a tough for me. I would love the guys, like the younger guys, to get an opportunity to taste playoffs. I also feel like, though, if they miss out, that maybe it'll fire them up a little bit more. You know what I mean? Like maybe it'll let some of these younger guys go, we missed out on an opportunity, and they want that. So they come back with more of a vengeance the next year. I don't know. That's a real tough question for me.
And just to let people know what the current status is with the playoffs. So the Dallas Cowboys are locked in as the 5th seed because of, I'm going to assume that the Niners are going to win the NFC West at 9-4 because the Seahawks are 2.5 games behind them now. Washington, 6th seed, 7-5-1. Giants, 7-5-1, are the 7th seed. Seahawks just outside, looking in at 7-6. Then you've got the Lions at 6-7. 2 bad teams are going to be in the playoffs, unless we want to call the Lions a good team. Then maybe at the moment they look like they're going to get in just by the fact that they keep winning. A bad team is going to be in the playoffs, whether it is Washington, New York, Seattle, or multiple of those. I think those 3 are bad teams. This is why I hate the 7-seed playoff nonsense, because who wants to watch the flipping Commanders, Giants, or Seahawks in a playoff game? Nobody. No effort wants to watch that. I don't want to watch that, and I'm a Seahawks fan. So it's, for me, I find it hard. I we've talked about this in the past, Adam. There's nothing quite like sort of that excitement of getting home on a Saturday night or a Sunday night or whatever and thinking, wow, playoff football involving the Seahawks tonight. I'm not sure that I'd be that particularly excited to watch this team get the doors blown off by the Niners or the Cowboys or somebody like that, or the Vikings. That to me just seems like an unpleasant experience, frankly, that will just cost us position to try and turn this around. What do you think?
I think my biggest concern is that if we don't make the playoffs, then having navigated what we thought was the tougher part of the schedule, we'll have ended up going 2-6 or 3-5 down the stretch. And you can't really look at it in a vacuum. We are clearly trying to build the next championship team. And if they make the playoffs, then they will have had, probably gone 4-on-4 or whatever, and put some wins together and maximizing talent. And the worry for me that if they end up going 2-6 in the final 8 games of the year, is it going to be a concern that we think we've, pissed the season away? That I think you said, Rob, we've got 32 players on the roster so far, or signed up next year. There's $28 million. There's not a bounty of resources next year, and it might be a case that you look back and think, well, should we have traded DK Metcalf away to get more picks? They've tried to sort of, I like the idea of sort of refilling the plane whilst the plane's in the sky, which is kind of what they're trying to do. They've not grounded us and say, let's start again. And my worry that if they end up sort of choking away a really favorable position, what does that say about the season and its value altogether? Now, obviously you've got the tackles, you've got Tariq Woolen, but that's just draft stuff that probably would have happened anyway. It's more a case of what have we used these 17 games for and the year of 2022 for? If we mess it up, I worry that could be a bit of an issue going forward.
I'm going to bring a topic up in a second. I don't know. I kind of my brain. I've got massive brain fog today. Like since last night, I've not been able to think about a great deal. I've kind of just been a zombie all day. I kind of feel like there's something I'm missing. That we're not talking about, or that maybe we should be talking about. And maybe people who have not got the brain fog that I have in the comment section can. If there's a topic you think we should be discussing that we're not, then stick it in the comment section and I'll bring it up. For some reason I kind of feel like we're missing something. So if there is something in the comment section that we should be getting into, then please bring it up.
Well, we do have the super chat about the coaches.
We've got the super chat of the coaches. Yeah, we'll come back to that definitely.
I feel like it's because the team's been sort of dragged into purgatory in the last month, and we need to kind of see stuff to have stuff to talk about. It feels that we're at that very weird part of the season where it's kind of hard to know which way it's going, and we need to see a bit more to know how to focus our conversations, really.
Yeah, it feels like a lot. When was it? It was about 2 weeks ago, Robbie, or 3 weeks ago that we did a stream when the bye week was on, and we were all kind of like talking about 10 or 11 wins or whatever it was, and Broncos losing out and stuff like that. That feels like a long time ago. Lethal Land says, win to make playoffs or lose for draft position. We have just discussed that. I mean, for me, I just to reiterate, in case you missed it, Lance, I don't personally can't get that excited about a playoff run this year. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and I suspect just taking one for the long run is probably for the best. Jason says, three of the three Lions loss has you a bit jaded today. Yeah, it certainly does. New D scheme deserves to see some real horses before final judgment. Big Al, Puna, and D's consistently beaten physically. It comes back to that, though, for me, Robbie, on that point. And thank you, Jason, for your super chat. It comes back to it for me, though. Yeah, okay. Regardless of the scheme, if you can get Jalen Carter and JL Skinner and guys like that, bring them in anyway. It doesn't matter what scheme you're playing. I like those players enough. You're not drafting them because of a set scheme. They could play in either scheme really. But I don't want to commit to a crap system. I really don't want to commit to something that I don't. And we've gone through this before. Look, I get it. Like the Cowboys have got Micah Parsons, the Niners have got Nick Bosa. The Jets have got Quinn and Williams. I get it. But they're three coaches that have come from the Seahawks system, and they're running something that's closer to Pete Carroll's defense than Vic Fangio's. And they're in the top 5 for defense with Dan Quinn, Ryans, and Robert Saleh. And we're trying to run something that's kind of a hybrid of Vic Fangio and Pete Carroll, and it looks like crap. And you actually look across the league, and we'll see it with probably Brandon Staley tonight, and other Vic Fangio defenses that don't have actually Vic Fangio running the system. They look like crap as well. So, I don't really know. And it's not. I don't fault the Seahawks for going. I quite liked the idea of trying the Fangio thing but it just doesn't seem to be working for me. It just seems like it's more of an effort to draft players to create this completely new system than it is just to go back to something that's closer to the old system and just get better in that system. That's what I'd rather do. I'd rather go back to the Pete Carroll. Hey, isn't that it? Pete Carroll run the Pete Carroll defense. Just get better players for it. That's what my preference would be, Robbie.
No, I'm 100% in agreement with you on that. I'm over this this hybrid version of Fangio's defense. It's garbage. I'm tired of it. I mean, we've seen it, time and time again. But I think there's some things about it that I can't put on the scheme. The tackling, for one, for me is just one big giant mystery. I don't understand why we don't wrap up and why we have such an issue tackling and why we're not like gang tackling. And it just seems like I don't know. I mean, I'm not really paying, I guess, that close attention, but are players just quitting on plays? Like, I don't really understand why the tackling has become such an issue, and it's been an issue all season.
Okay, here's a question then. So I'll bring the old. We do this every week, so I'm going to do it before I invite you into this particular discussion. Here is the Tankathon latest. I'll move it down a little bit so you can see where Seattle. There you go. Seattle at number 2 and number 18. So because the Broncos lost again, they're now level record with Chicago. The Bears are probably going to lose out because the teams that they're playing are very good. They're probably going to lose out. So if you want the number 2 pick, you're going to have to hope that the Broncos lose out. The Broncos played very well against the Chiefs today, by the way. I don't know what Mahomes was like, brilliant on half his plays and absolutely honking on his others. Like, it was a real hit and miss game from Mahomes today. I had I had that on my phone while I was watching the Seahawks on my iPad. And I don't know what to make of that. I don't know whether the Broncos actually are showing maybe some signs of turning a corner maybe in that game, or whether it was just the Chiefs played like crap. I don't know.
I think it's a combination. First of all, they're going to give it their absolute best against the best in the division. I mean, we used to see this all the time, right? We were the best team in the league, and teams would give us an absolute their best game. So that's what I think it was. I'm not buying into the Broncos at all.
Of course, Russell Wilson actually had a really nasty injury in this game. He was down. He looked like he was out cold on the floor, and then he did his Russell thing where he got up and immediately, tried to sort of give the impression that he could carry on and play the game because he didn't want to leave the game. But there was no way they were going to let him back in. He got a lump on his head. It was quite scary when he was down, and who knows if he's going to be able to play the next game. It could be a Brett Ripien special, and he looked absolutely dreadful when he came into the game. Awful. Although he did throw a touchdown pass on 4th down in his first series, but after that he was not good. So I still think that maybe Baker Mayfield can do something for the Rams, and they can get a bit of a shift on here perhaps. And the Arizona Cardinals play tomorrow against the Patriots. So no, I still think that the chances are the Broncos are not going to give you the 2nd overall pick. I think it's more likely to be 3rd, 4th, or 5th. But it is going to be sort of that range, I think. I don't see them winning more than 1 or 2 games to finish the year. And you currently have the number 18 pick because you're just outside the playoffs. So, and that could change depending on what happens with the Chargers who are playing the Dolphins. If the Chargers win, you will potentially go below them, depending on what their strength of schedule turns out to be. You wouldn't at the moment because their strength of schedule is worse. But when they play the Dolphins, that will adjust. So they might jump ahead of you. And if the Patriots win, then you would move up to 17 when they play the Cardinals. So that's where we're at with the Seahawks draft position. But you've got the number 2 pick at the minute. Let's see the season finishes. Adam, are you going defense there? Today, if you needed to make a decision there, or are you more inclined to think quarterback again after Geno Smith's had not a great day? Again, there's the sort of mitigating circumstances for that. No defense, no run game. But what are you thinking about the bigger picture of this team? Because I think it's increasingly becoming more of a debate than it was a couple of weeks ago about what they should do here.
It's funny because we've been talking about so much and we barely mentioned a player's name on defense, really. And it kind of concerns me a bit. Like, does the player they get actually matter when it comes to defense at the minute? I mean, are we so certain that getting Jalen Carter would be make such an enormous difference when we're so worried about scheme? So in theory, yeah, if Jalen Carter, Will Anderson are there, then that would seem to think that's going to make a huge difference to the defense. But it hasn't happened with all the other seemingly great defensive players they've picked up over the last 3 or 4 years. So is there any reason to say this will be markedly better? I mean, are they so much better than the other guys they brought in? And then obviously there's the Anthony Richardson discussion. I'm not so overly enamored by any of the other quarterbacks, given given that like the hit rate of rookie quarterbacks at the minute anyway, this is to use that pick on a quarterback that you're not sure of would strike me as really concerning. I mean, look, Rob, you'll forget more about the draft than I'll ever know. I mean, what do you reckon?
I think it's a really important conversation to have. I don't think I think he's become established among some of the noisier elements of Seahawks Twitter, for example. That noisy is quite an insulting way of putting it. I think sort of the more vocal members, let's say, that's probably a more respectful way of putting it, seem to have just decided that it's defense, that they should just defense. And I can see why. I think that Geno Smith has played well enough that you can kind of think, well, his level of performance this year is not a problem. I think the thing you have to consider, though, is his level of performance ever going to be good enough to get you to the promised land? Because ultimately, the point of the game is to win a championship. It's not to be better than expected. It's not for Geno Smith to have a nice story that makes some nice articles or videos on social media. It's to actually if Geno Smith has to come up against a top quarterback, in the playoffs, or if he has to beat a Niners level defense, can he do it? And those, I still think one decent season, which has still had its moments where you think, oh, that's not great, as we saw today, makes you think, well, okay. And look, I think with the quarterback class, I have watched every game that Anthony Richardson's played, every game that Will Levis has played, every game that CJ Stroud's played, every game that Bryce Young's played. I've watched them all. Like, it's been a real mind-numbingly dull sort of process, actually, to watch all of these games just to get an angle on them. And you could make an argument for all of them. You could make a legit argument for all of these quarterbacks. And I still would love to come up with a way that you kind of have a handing of the baton, where you sort of have Geno Smith for a bit longer at a reasonable cost. And then a year or two down the line, you hand it off to a much younger, very talented, high upside player, and you just accept that this is a flipping rebuild. There is still something to be said for that. And I think, Kenneth Arthur made a good point on Twitter, I think it was about 10 days ago, actually. He included me in his tweet. So I read the thread he was talking about, and he said that actually, sometimes you've just got to find players in other areas. The Seahawks did that, with Richard Sherman. They've done it with Tariq Woolen. Max Crosby destroyed the Seahawks last week. He was a 4th round pick. Sometimes you've just got to find where these diamonds are, and it doesn't necessarily have to be number 2. Number 2 overall is not the only place where you're going to get an impact defensive lineman. So if you are approaching this as this is a rare opportunity to pick 2nd overall, we don't intend to be here ever again, short of another blockbuster trade that comes out in our favor in the way this one has, that no one could have ever predicted it was going to work out like this. Do you have to seize the opportunity and just take a quarterback and just go, look, I think Anthony Richardson's got amazing upside. Doesn't mean that I'm not saying that I think he's going to be a Hall of Famer or a Pro Bowler or a top 5 quarterback. He's just got amazing potential. That's all. I think that's only as far as you can only ever go. And you can pick holes in players. I put an article up this week, which I would encourage people to read, about what people were saying about Patrick Mahomes when he came out. Daniel Jeremiah did a big board in April before the 2017 draft and didn't even have Mahomes in his like top 50. So, people can pick holes in these players. Sometimes you've just got to take a chance on the talent. And that's what I think if you could do that. So for me right now, I'm thinking, take the chance to invest in a quarterback, let them sit, let them develop. And I think you just have to accept that this is a build, because I do not think necessarily that if you just plonk Jalen Carter onto the field today, that we're going to see a completely different Seahawks team. It'd be better. It'd be nice to have an impact player like that. But I don't think it's going to make you suddenly a great defense. And the other thing to remember with Jalen Carter, because people love to, sorry to go on a bit, just a final point on this. People love to pick holes in quarterbacks. They don't pick holes in defensive linemen. So, for example, I could show you 10 plays where Anthony Richardson does something amazing. And you would go, wow, that's fantastic. But then people judge quarterbacks on Oh, but what about that inaccurate pass that he made? He threw 30 balls, but there was that inaccurate pass, wasn't there? So we need to think about that. Oh, but what about that snap where he made the wrong read? What about that snap where he threw the interception? People don't do that about defensive linemen. I could show you snaps where Jalen Carter doesn't get off a block. In the first series against LSU in the SEC championship game, he looked absolutely knackered on the first drive because it was a long LSU drive. And I'm watching, I'm getting a bit worried. I'm thinking he's shattered. He's exhausted. There are plenty of snaps where he can't get off a block. And there's actually snaps on tape where he doesn't even look like he can be asked. He's just thinking, I'm having a snap off here. But then what happens is he comes roaring back and, swim moves past somebody, blazes into the backfield, makes a play against a college offensive tackle or offensive guard or center, and people go crazy for it. But we don't judge the inconsistencies with top defensive linemen in the same way that we do with quarterbacks. So we can almost make out that I actually think Jalen Carter is an amazing player. But I think he might take him 2 years to get to a conditioning level and a consistency level like Quinnen Williams, where you actually see the best of him. How's that any different to Anthony Richardson? If Jalen Carter needs 2 years, like Quinnen Williams did, or 3 years like Quinnen Williams did, to become Quinnen Williams in college, if Jalen Carter needs that, what's the difference between that and developing a quarterback, frankly? Apologies for the ramble. Robbie, what do you think?
No, I said a couple of weeks ago that my thoughts have been take quarterback early. Pretty much the whole time. I said last week or maybe a week prior, I can't remember, that I was starting to come around on the idea of maybe taking, a Jalen Carter or Will Anderson or someone like that, and then, trying to find a quarterback later in the draft. Like the idea had started to come around on me a little bit because I had been feeling decent about the way Geno was playing and giving him the opportunity to continue to go, and then have somebody else just develop, and maybe getting that impact defensive player. But you're right. I mean, I've watched highlight tapes of these guys, and more often than not, I find myself being disappointed a little bit and just coming away not as hyped as I was going into it. Now, I'll tell you, there's a guy that you brought up 4 or 5 weeks ago that has got me fairly excited, and I'm interested to see how he tests. Kalijah Kancey out of Pitt. That guy is something. He reminds me of a lot of the same kind of things that Aaron Donald brings to the table. Now, he's not as big as Aaron Donald. He is not Aaron Donald. Let's just say that right now. But he has a lot of those traits, and I really like the way that his team seems to rally around him. He seems like he's one of those badass mothers that we just need on our team. Like, he's like the kind of guy that reminds me of someone that people are going to rally around and want to play hard for. And I think that's one of those guys that we need. We need guys on the defensive side that are alphas, that are straight alphas, that want to dominate the game. We need, the Cam Chancellor kind of guys. And he has the skill set that makes me think that he has the potential to do that. Again, it's a potential thing. I see him as a player that has high upside. And for me, what I would prefer they do, if you have the second or third pick in the draft, you take a quarterback with the hopes that he develops behind Geno, and then you take the next pick is where you take Kalijah Kancey. That would be my dream scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I think again this kind of comes back to the old scheme, because I can see a home for Kancey in a Carroll scheme as an impact rusher, as a rookie, where he can do some damage. I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, Clint Hurt was doing an interview and he was talking about long arms on defensive linemen and why you need long arms on defensive linemen. And as he was talking, constantly mentioning long arms and length and how important it was for defensive linemen, it reminded me that the Seahawks don't draft defensive linemen with sub 33-inch arms, and that in this scheme, it's even more important. And with this scheme, they seem to be just, I've said it a few times, having sort of 3 bigger bodies up front just to sort of try and defend the run badly. And then they kind of have their outside linebackers almost as contain men, not actually rushing the passer until it gets called, yeah, you can now rush the passer. And it's not creating a pass rush, and it's not defending the run either. And I find it hard to see how a Kalijah Kancey fits into that scheme. But I can see him in Pete Carroll's scheme. So there we go. And listen, look, the great thing is I think we'll be having this argument right up until the point that we know what's happening with Geno Smith and Drew Lock and beyond. And even then, plenty of teams like Chicago signed Mike Glennon to a big contract, announced he was the starter, and then traded up one spot to draft Mitch Trubisky over Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes. So, it could be that they sign Smith and Locke and then draft a quarterback. It won't be the defining factor. I'm sure people will assume it is if they sign those two back. they might still go and do the draft a quarterback. Then it might be a bluff, but you can make an argument for both things: drafting a quarterback to develop, drafting a quarterback if it was someone like Will Levis to potentially start quickly, or saying we are just going to invest everything in the defensive line and build through the trenches. I could rally behind that just as much as I can drafted to develop a quarterback. I don't think there's a wrong answer in that. But it's a quarterback league, isn't it? And how often are you going to pick second overall? I don't know. But then there is part of me that thinks if you genuinely believe Jalen Carter is your answer to these beasts on the defensive line and Donald, Bosa, those kind of players, maybe you have to go and have a look at that. Got some more super chats. Corey says, how do you feel about Broderick Jones at right guard with our native first round pick? Look, I like Broderick Jones as a guard. I mean, I keep seeing him mocked in the first round as a tackle. For me, he's a guard all day long. At the next level, I find it hard to invest in a converted tackle for first round pick in this scheme. And I know that the guards and the centre are playing like crap at the minute, apparently. And I've not seen the grades, but they don't look very good. They're not running the ball very well. I just still find it hard to think, okay, if there's been a first round pick there and a left tackle who has to move to right guard. Just struggling a little bit with that one. But we'll see. I might come round on that. Mike says, thanks to the three of you for the great debrief. No place I'd rather be after a loss. Thank you, Mike. Really appreciate that. And for the super chat. I wish the bad home losses to bad teams was enough to disqualify them from the playoffs. Don't want that 7th spot. Tend to agree with you there, Mike. And there is one more, I think, that has just come in from Hans. Thank you, Hans, for your support as well. It does mean a great deal.
Can I ask you both a draft question?
Of course.
Just because you guys have got the player knowledge and I can kind of look at the traits a bit. If it's all I can really do. Last year, I think the thing that struck all of us was, I think, the conviction that they took the players. Knight, Charles Cross, Kenneth Walker was there, Boye Mafe was there, and it was a case of, this is who we like, this is who's fallen to us, and they kind of took everyone from what it seemed to be a point of, this is clearly the best player we could take there, and we're just going to take them. Is there a slight concern in a weird way that being at number 2 or number 3 could get us back into the position where we've been in the last few years, where they sort of get themselves a bit muddled and they don't pick with the conviction that they showed last year, and then they try and be a bit clever and it's like, well, he could do this, he could do that. Does that concern you at all? Because from a sort of non-draft looking in, that's one thing that does worry me slightly about this front office.
Yeah, I'll go first, Rob. Yes, simple answer, Adam. Yes, absolutely. I mean, anytime you go into the draft with this kind of capital and the opportunity to draft that high, you're always worried what they're going to do with it. And I mean, and they've showed for a couple of years they draft poorly. So last year they hit the nail on the head, and I really hope that they're able to continue that. But man, I don't know. Yeah, it definitely makes me nervous. I could see a scenario where we trade back. Maybe there's a team that really is desperate for a quarterback, and we're deciding, no, we're not. We're going to trade back into the 7th and 8th spot and snag a different, couple more picks. And I could see a scenario where that happens, and then us being all pissed off that they didn't take a Jalen Carter or Will Anderson or Anthony Richardson or something like that. That somebody else chose our guy just so we could drop back a few more spots. But I don't know. I mean, I'm always worried about it.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, a lot of people have started talking about this now, about whether they should trade down, and if they get a great offer, should they move down and stuff like that. And I've kind of always pushed back against it, because I like you, Adam, I thought it was good to see them just picking players with a conviction and just drafting guys and adding the team. And funny enough, one of the teams who doesn't trade down hardly ever and just sort of doesn't even really engage in those conversations and just kind of drafts are the Bengals. They're notorious for it, and they actually haven't drafted that badly over the years. Even though they've kind of got a bit of a shambolic reputation as a franchise and don't really have a GM, and the owner kind of runs it like a family bakery rather than a football team. They have actually produced some winning teams. The Carson Palmer era was a successful team that it wasn't short for injury, would have got to a Super Bowl potentially, and then you had the Andy Dalton years where they were a consistent playoff team and just could never get out their own way in a playoff game. And then they've actually got to the Super Bowl under Joe Burrow, and they kind of just sort of stick and pick. And maybe the Seahawks, you can be a bit too clever by half sometimes. Oh, well, we'll just trade down a few spots here and get a fourth or something. And I don't know. I don't really want to talk about that. Oh, what could they get if they moved down 4 spots? It's like, well, I don't know. Like because sometimes you get a team throwing picks at teams like the Niners did for Trey Lance, and then other times it's like a third to move down a few spots. Like you just don't know. So it's hard to predict and project or say what you would accept. But I guess as we get nearer the time, I would be willing to sort of move down a few spots if it was an amazing offer, if the player they're going to take at 2 or 3 is going to be there anyway. I just had to point this out because like Jason says, Cincinnati's barely done anything for decades. Last year was a huge fluke. You can't fluke your way to a Super Bowl. That's the first thing I would say. Second of all, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase are not flukes. Neither is T. Higgins. Neither are some of those guys they've signed on the defense or drafted on the defense like Sam Hubbard and Jesse Bates. It's not a fluke, that. And as I just said, there were playoffs every year under Andy Dalton for a period. And under Carson Palmer, they were a very, very competitive team. And if it wasn't for injuries, there was that one year when Seattle got to the Super Bowl, that if it wasn't for the injuries, they would have been a real contender there. So let's just not, like I say, they've got a reputation for being a shambles, and they do mix from shambles to good all the time. But hey, right now, the Bengals are as good a bet as anybody to make the flipping playoffs. So let's not be too silly about that. And they're in the Super Bowl last year. I'd love to be in a Super Bowl. So yeah. So I guess to answer your question, Adam, I am a bit worried about that. I don't know. I wish it was a year where there was a really obvious sort of like 5 top players, and you could just go, we're going to get one of them. I think that you've essentially got 4 quarterbacks who, I bet if you talk to 20 teams, they would have them all graded slightly differently. There's not sort of like a clear cut, this is the guy, this is the guy. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Jalen Carter's very good, but he's not flawless. People act like he is. He isn't. And then you've got Will Anderson, who people think is flawless, and he isn't. He's a project. He's a 243-pound outside linebacker. Got a lot of talent, but needs to be harnessed in the right way. So, yeah. Have you come up with any names for coaches who could potentially replace? Because that was a question that was asked. So if people wondered why we're talking about this, it was a super chat question.
Well, I'm going to start. I'll go first. So I've got 2, one for offense and one for defense. Okay, so I got, and it's funny that you bring up the Bengals because Brian Callahan I don't think he actually calls plays there, but he has been a huge part of Joe Burrow's development there and the offensive scheme that they're running. And he interviewed really, really well last year with Denver. I remember that. And there was a potential that he could have actually gotten the head coaching job. Then they went with, their good old buddy that they wanted Aaron Rodgers to come with and didn't, so they had to settle for a. Anyways, that would be number 1. And number 2 is going to shock you a little bit. I'm going to go with Dan Quinn. I just think he's really turned it around. I mean, I know he's working with Micah Parsons in Dallas, but the way that the way he runs his defense, I think if he was running our team right now with the defense that we have, I think they would be extremely improved and would be a lot better than they are now. And I still trust that Shane Waldron's running the right offensive scheme. So I like what he's doing. He could keep Shane Waldron as offensive coordinator and then run the defense and be the head coach. Those are my two suggestions.
Adam, any thoughts?
It's such a difficult question. I feel that sometimes we find ourselves sort of hamstrung by this concept that those that are head coaches or those that are very close to being head coaches are the sort of only pool of people that you can possibly go fishing for. Like there's part of me that thinks, is there a Mike McDaniel buried in someone's, as a run game coordinator for someone that you can poach and get out ahead of it? And I mean, I don't know. I find myself almost alarmingly impressed with what Shane Waldron's done this year. Maybe that's regressing slightly in the last few weeks with the offense maybe isn't firing quite as well. But I don't know, that there's part of me that thinks that the mentality of the guy and the way in which they can interact with the younger players is so important that I don't know if someone like a Dan Quinn, maybe that ship has sailed and he's just really good at dealing with the defensive side. It really is such a hard question, and this is a pathetic answer, to be honest, and I'll own that because I've offered absolutely nothing to the conversation for the last minute apart from rubbish conjecture. which is a long rail round of saying I don't really know. To be honest, I'm sorry to the super chat for wasting the 60p on my third of the contribution.
So, I mean, I think that there are some interesting names. Like, I guess if you want to sort of look at the Eagles' offense as kind of like consistently produced results, I guess, from Doug Peterson to Frank Reich, and now you've got the Eagles doing well again. You know, Frank Reich's offensive coordinator has gone to the Eagles, and he's doing a good job. So, can you tap into that pool? Shane Steichen is the offensive coordinator with the Eagles. Is he somebody? Could he be your, you know, your Cipriani or whatever he's called? I can't remember. Sirianni. Cipriani is a rugby player. Sirianni, is it? Who's the coach of the Eagles? Could he be your answer to that? Frank Reich, I guess, is out of work. You know, I think he was a surprising fire at the Colts and never really had anything to really go with there in terms of quarterbacks. They just kept swapping him in and out. You know, you've mentioned Dan Quinn and Callahan, who could be options there, Robbie, I guess. And there's Kellen Moore, isn't there? Who still looks about 27 years old. And I don't know. I mean, he's done a good job with the Cowboys, but then I suppose the thing about Dan Quinn and Kellen Moore is they've been given a lot to work with. And, you know, the Cowboys consistently draft very, very well. So we'll see. You know, we'll see. That there are some of the names to chuck out there.
Of course, we're talking like this, like Pete's actually going to go anywhere.
Yeah, he's not going anywhere, is he? There's no way that Jody Allen. What I did like was that, you know, people like to sort of hand out receipts in Seattle. And a few weeks ago, we had all of the, you know, somebody posted on Twitter a picture of Jody Allen, Pete Carroll, and John Schneider in Germany, saying how grateful we should all be to these three individuals and how wrong everybody should say they are about ever doubting any of them or anything like this. And I kind of think, well, you know, can we just, you know, shut the F up about stuff like that? Because every time you say something like that, this happens and you go on a crap run. And with respect, the people who have challenged some of those individuals have never done so from a point of anything other than wanting the Seahawks to win. So, and those of us who are doing that, apart from this, you know, little soliloquy here, are not ranting and raving on Twitter, demanding their respect from people who went the other way on that debate. So yeah, and Jody Allen is not going to fire Pete Carroll, and Pete Carroll's not going anywhere. But it might need a serious defensive review in the offseason again because this ain't working at the minute. The final thing I wanted to talk about, because Adam is here, so apologies in advance. Adam, how are you feeling, Adam, about what has happened this week? And I'm just intrigued to know, as I kind of wallow in my own depths of despair. I want to know how you're feeling because I know that you said that you're not perhaps as what's the right word? You're a club man first. As a Spurs fan, I consider myself a countryman first because of the job that I do. You know, you can't really support a team and do this job. So I've got my own kind of hurt feelings over this. But how are you feeling this weekend? You've just watched the Seahawks lose, and you had to deal with what happened yesterday.
Yeah. Had better weekends, I think you're probably fairly safe to say. I am a more club man over a country man, and there is part of the whole World Cup experience that I do feel is slightly damaged by the fact that as soon as this finishes, club football sort of swings back into focus. And part of the Summer World Cups, and sorry, Robbie, you can sit back in your chair here. Pour yourself a bourbon or make a long old fashioned, something that takes a long time to stew, because I think we could go a bit here. There's part of it that, when you lose a World Cup on the 30th of June or whatever, you've got a month and a half to wallow in the misery. Whereas now I'm thinking, well, I've got Brentford away on Boxing Day for Spurs. That's 2 weeks away. So it's not the end of the world. But for me, by far, the worst part is that my absolute hero is the one that unfortunately didn't make the play in the big moment. And Harry Kane has given me as much joy as any sportsman has ever done. And I idolize him, even though he's 6 years younger than me. I completely idolize him and owe him so much happiness that I've been able to celebrate with my dad and my friends. And I guess you could extrapolate this to any sport when you spend time adoring a player who gives you joy with your friends and family. And it happens to be this time, it's my hero that's unfortunately going to be on the end of it. And I find that borderline heartbreaking, to be honest, which I probably should be more mature as a 35-year-old and just become a father. You feel that there should be bigger things, but I am heartbroken for my hero. And that is something that's going to take me quite a while to get over, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think this goes beyond just sort of like an England discussion, actually. I think it's quite an interesting way to end the conversation, because I have been thinking about this over the weekend. Because I remember what I felt when the Seahawks lost the Super Bowl to New England. And it was just sort of like, it did feel like a mourning period. I don't know if you guys felt like that, but it certainly, after, for a good sort of couple of weeks at least, probably longer, in fact, in that one, because of the way it happened, it probably felt longer than that, you get people who I never really understand people who don't like sport. I understand that they exist, but I don't. I think they're missing out. It kind of feels like we're in on something that they don't. It's a secret almost, that they need to just sort of learn the secret, because there's nothing better. I don't think you really feel alive unless you straddle what sport gives you, which is that constant fine line between the most abject, horrible misery and the most great pleasure you could ever have. It becomes a drug almost, or a religion that you kind of have to have in your life. That if this goes this way, this is going to be one of the best days of my life. That's where I was thinking last night. Was with my friends at work. We were watching it in the office, and we're saying, if England win this game, we are going to go out tonight, and we ain't going to come back till 6 o'clock in the morning, and we are just going to enjoy the heck out of this. This is going to be amazing. But if they don't win, it's going to be, we're going to remember it for all the wrong reasons. Like, I'm never going to forget. I remember where I was, who I was with, what I was doing, and every single one of England's losses in a major tournament. And I can tell you where I was, who I was with, what I was doing on every single horrific Seahawks loss or great moment. I remember stupid things like the Houston Texans game in 2013, because it was the day my son was born. And then they had that great comeback win, a few hours after. I remember beating the Niners on the 23rd of December in the 2012 season, and what I was doing and going straight into work and not even going to bed. I can remember these things. It kind of places you. It context for a diehard sports fan. It puts you. You kind of bookmark moments in your life around specific games or victories or losses. And yesterday was another one. It was just another one. And I constantly sit there and think, as someone who has grown up in a region where you do not have a brilliant Premier League football team who wins a lot of stuff, or I've followed England, and I'm a Seahawks fan, and I really, it makes me really appreciate that we had one Super Bowl, because without that, I'd have had no sporting sort of enjoyment in my life. And I'm 38. That's the only moment in my life when I've actually been able to say, we did it. And you can go to bed, and there's no next game that you've got to worry about. It's just, you won the last game, and that's it. It's just over. You got to lift the trophy, and you can always have that, and you will always have that moment. And the Seahawks decided that, well, you can have that for a year, but we're going to give you the worst loss that you're ever going to have a year later, to sort of make sure that you jolly well don't enjoy that Super Bowl success as much as you want. You should be able to. So thanks for that. But I know it's a bit of an off-topic thing to feel, to sort of end the stream with, but I do find it interesting, Robbie, that sport does that, and for me, it makes you feel alive. Even though right now, I kind of just want to hibernate like a bear for 3 months and then just come back when everything's kicking in for draft season. But I almost wouldn't have it any other way. It's sort of the risk of horrible pain that makes that odd moment when it actually goes right all the more worthwhile.
So I gotta be honest. I saw Adam's tweet this morning when he tagged me, and I had no idea what the hell you guys were talking about. I was like, "What happened? What happened?" I'm like checking ESPN. I'm coming to your blog, and I'm like, oh, I don't understand. And then I saw England had lost to France. I was like, got it. Yeah. So for me, like, man, I'll tell you what. When we lost the Super Bowl to the Pats, I was in Vegas, and I was actually trying to go to the Super Bowl because I had went the year prior, and I felt like I was like this good luck charm, so I had to go. But tickets just never dropped. They just didn't. Okay, ticket prices never dropped. And I'll tell you what, going to a Super Bowl and winning was probably the best experience of my life. It was euphoria. I was living on cloud nine. I literally just had the best night of my life ever. And I went the night that we lost the Super Bowl to the Pats. I went back to the hotel room, and it was like super early. I just went straight to bed. I was so sad and just distraught. I went straight to bed. I got up in the morning. I didn't even want to face the world. I literally, I had a flight that was like 2 or 3 days later. I rebooked my flight to leave that morning. And I just went home. I went home. I didn't want to enjoy Vegas. I didn't want to be around people. I just left and came back. And that's, so I get where you're coming from. It's a painful spot. You just, I don't know how you don't ever actually recover from that. You know what I mean? Like, I will never recover from that Super Bowl. I just won't. Like, it's never going to be the same. Right. And, so I feel you. I'm sorry for your loss. We lost in the first round of Netherlands, so whatever. I don't know. Our men teams is not very good. I think I've said this before to you, Rob, and you gave me a hard time about it. But I'm more of a women's soccer fan because we actually win and they're more fun to watch. And I watched way back when Mia Hamm was the thing. So yeah, so that was.
Yeah, I think the thing is, I mean, and this is please tell me to stop if you don't want to go and talk about this. But I think the thing with American sports is it's very insular. Like, you call the baseball championship the World Series, but only American and Canadian teams compete in it. American football, NFL, it may well branch out to European teams, but they will be franchises. There won't be any sort of real genetic. It'll be an implant into Europe. It will not be a club started, like all the football clubs over here started because basically butchers and bakers needed something to do on a Saturday afternoon. And they just turned into, world dominating, businesses. And that's just how it's developed over, 180 years of history. Your sports are American sports. And therefore, the thing about our national sport is it's the world game, and we have this World Cup, which is just this ridiculous thing every 4 years. And as I've kind of grown up, it's the one. I just want to see England win something. I kind of feel very lucky in my life, and I get that this is a massively privileged thing I'm about to say. I kind of feel like I've achieved everything in my life that I really wanted to achieve. I really wanted to be a dad, and I really wanted to do the job that I do now. And the only thing that's kind of left is I just want to see England flip and win something. And when they get as close as winning that game last night, and you're thinking, oh, Morocco in the semi-final, and you just start to think, this is it. The stars are aligning, and just as you start to believe, it gets snatched away. And and the thing about that was particularly heartbreaking yesterday is that it is quite similar to the Pats loss. It's if the Seahawks had just lost to the Patriots, let's just say that it was a really close game, and Tom Brady drove the Patriots into field goal range. They kicked a field goal as time expired, and everyone just went, Brady's just done it again. You can live with that. But when it's an interception on the 1 yard line and you got the whole team fighting each other and the whole thing implodes and they start calling it the Titanic, it's worse. It's worse. And yesterday, if that Giroud goal, Olivier Giroud was the Frenchman who scored the winning goal. If that just happens and England just don't find a way to win, get back into it, you kind of just go, well done, France. But because the striker you would have put your mortgage on scoring a penalty is somehow, he takes 100 penalties and probably scores 90 of them, has somehow hit it over the bar. You just think, I can't. It's just, you can't believe it. You just cannot believe it, and it makes it worse. And he is, a likable person on a likable squad, and you just think, I can't deal with this. It's just worse. And now we have to wait 18 months for the next go. We can't even just wait till next season. We have to wait 18 months, and for the World Cup we have to wait 4 years. But Robbie, get your spare room ready, because in 4 years I'm going to be coming for the World Cup in America, and I need somewhere to stay.
Come on over, man. You got a place here always.
If there's a way to sort of bring it back around, and Rob, you and I have discussed sort of the dynamic of being a British fan following an NFL team. I mean, I booked flights. I don't know if I've ever said this on the show, but I booked flights in the October of the Super Bowl winning year to be in Seattle for the Super Bowl that we won. And so when Richard Sherman gets the tip, I'm flying around my living room at 3 a.m. doing that sort of silent screaming that you do so as not to wake anyone up, because not only with the Seahawks in the Super Bowl, whole holiday had been like vindicated to be in Seattle, and I was there, and it was amazing. And with the Seahawks, I've met people like yourself. I've met Stuart, who I've done my show with, and we're nearly 200 episodes, so we've done over 300 hours of post 11 p.m. post midnight podcasting. We don't get paid for it. We do it because we love it. And when the Seahawks play and it's nearly 2 a.m, and I love being on this show, I love talking about it and all that stuff. But ultimately, if I can bring it back around to sort of where we are now, the apathy is the one thing that I can't tolerate. And I'd almost rather lose every Super Bowl like we did to the Patriots than sort of have 3 or 4 years of nothingness, which is what I've felt in the last 3 or 4 years, where there just hasn't been an end in sight. There hasn't been the prospect of the glory at the end. And I'd always rather come slightly short of glory than not even bother with it at all. And I think that's probably where I'm finding myself a bit dismayed today. And someone said in the chat we feel a bit flat. I think that's probably why, because for the last 5 or 6 weeks we've thought, hang on, I can kind of see a pathway to getting back to it, and it just kind of feels like we hit a few obstacles in the road that are putting that view much more in the distance. I hope that ramble has kind of made a bit of circular sense, but that's kind of where I am with it, to sort of bring it back from a macro to a micro on the game tonight.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it, actually. I feel like I've been hit Cam Chancellor style from one side of the deflating Seahawks loss, making you feel like this team's a long way away, and rather than sort of a competitive team with luxury of draft picks that we thought they were maybe just a fortnight ago, reality has dawned there. And on the other side, another Cam Chancellor has run in and hit me. And it is the thought that I could be sat here now, and look, it's probably for the best actually that England lost for the American viewers who don't care about the World Cup, because I'd have been really insufferable if England had won that game yesterday. I'd have had a big smile on my face. My throat would have been even worse. I'd have probably been hungover, and I would have just been really excited and just thinking, oh well, at least England won. So it's probably the mood of this stream is probably one that goes along with how Seahawks fans are feeling. Yeah, when it comes back to it, I think you're right, Adam. I'd hate to sort of not have the moments, and this is the thing with the Seahawks. I don't want them to just be average for the next 10 years and not get close. And I'd hate for England to go back to what they were in 2010 and 2014, where you've got no real hope. You watch the games, but you don't have any expectation, any belief. Give me the next tournaments. I'll be 40 during the next tournament, and you better believe I'm going to be in Germany for that tournament, and believing that England can win it. And that is at least having that in your life is more interesting than just thinking, oh, let's go for a sing song like the Welsh do. So, sorry if there's any Welsh people who are watching the stream. But yeah, I suppose from both teams' perspective, I just want them to be good. And we'll see. It certainly does feel like the Seahawks are quite a way off good at the minute. Robbie, have you got a final thought to... And can I just say, I'm really sorry if I sounded really down, or if people don't care about England and stuff like that. It's just something I really, really want to see happen, and I've kind of struggled with that this weekend. That was a really hard, and plus it was worse because there was nobody to really. I know Harry Kane. Some people will point a finger at Harry Kane, but I couldn't point a finger at anybody. I just couldn't complain. There's nothing to complain about. They just sadly lost. Which kind of made it all the more miserable. There was no one to shout at. Robbie, is there any final thoughts? And if there's any I can see a last super chat has come in. If there's any last one of those, stick them in. But Robbie, any final thoughts on the Hawks?
No, just I kind of, like I said it last week, I feel like this is a team that was on the outside looking in with the playoffs. I feel like that's going to be the same. Especially with the way this defense is playing, it just doesn't seem like this is a team ready to compete for a playoff run. So thank God the Broncos keep losing, and hopefully that trend continues, and hopefully the Bears can sneak out a win or two and give us that second pick. But like Adam said, hopefully they make the right choices with those picks and don't overthink it like they have in the past.
Adam, any final thoughts on anything?
Not really. I do like the fact that the last comment in the chat is just fire Pete. It's just quite funny. We'll hour and 24 minutes, and there we are. Let's just leave. Yeah, that's where we are. The people have spoken. So I guess that's that. We're back on that. And I love it.
Okay. The final super chat is from Mike. Re-England, easy running 18 and 21 folders. Maybe so. I'm not sure I'll ever get over that loss last year. That felt like the time. But we'll see. We'll go again, as the players often tweet on Twitter. We'll go again in 18 months. See if that can be the year. And the Seahawks will go again on Thursday. As I mentioned, I am abroad, and it's a 3 a.m. start. So I will speak to the fellas and we'll let them know what I'm planning to do, whether I will watch it live or in the morning and then do a quick video myself, or whether Robbie can jump on or whatever. But there will be some content on the channel. I just don't know what form it's going to come on Thursday. But I'll tell you now, as depressing as everything is right now, I love a win against the Niners. So if that could happen on Thursday, that would just be the kind of pick-me-up that I would hope for. And I'm going to ignore that comment that's just dropped into the live chat with a prediction for the game. Subscribe to the channel. Please like the video, comment in the comments as well as the live chat if you wouldn't mind. That helps promote the video. Spread the word. SeahawksDraftBlog.com for more analysis. Here's to less misery moving forward. Have a great end to your weekend. Bye for now.